Hey everybody, and thank you for stopping by to congratulate and honor this year's NASSM Diversity Award winner, Dr. Jacqueline McDowell, Associate Professor of Sport Management and the Academic Program Coordinator of the Kinesiology Undergraduate Program at George Mason University. I'm honored that Jacqueline has asked me to introduce her. I believe her to be the true embodiment of this award, not only in her efforts towards diversity promotion and inclusion throughout the NASSM community, but also in her teaching, research, and service. In the classroom, she's taught diversity and inclusion issues in sport, diversity in sport organizations, sociology of sport. She's been invited to numerous speaking engagements here at UF as well as other institutions, but her reach extends beyond just the United States. She's delivered over 19 teaching presentations to athletes, athletic administrators, and coaches from countries all over the world, including Nigeria, Colombia, Peru, and Zimbabwe, just to name a few. Her research focuses on issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity in sport and recreation organizations, with a particular emphasis on the intersecting identities of women of color in sports spaces. To this end, Jacqueline has authored or co-authored many peer-reviewed manuscripts and book chapters that serve to investigate and develop practical strategies and programs aimed at removing barriers to employment and participation opportunities in sport and physical activity. She wants her research to be practically impactful and not just read by the scholar community. In 2013, she partnered with campus recreation leaders and received a grant from the National Intramural Recreational Sports Association to evaluate Title IX compliance in collegiate campus, recreation, and intramural departments. And for this, she and her co-authors were awarded the 2017 NASSM President's Award for Article of Distinction. She's presented her work at various international, national, and regional conferences and has made sharing her findings with the NASSM membership a priority throughout her career, as evidenced by her 23 NASSM conference presentations. She's mentored numerous graduate students, having chaired 5 doctoral dissertation committees as well as numerous thesis committees, many of which were centered on diversity-related research. And this demonstrates her desire to foster a culture of impactful research, as well as educate and mentor future scholars to do the same. In fact, as a student, she became the first Black female to earn her doctorate in sport management at Texas A&M University, Gig'em. And currently, she is co-editor of a special issue for SMED titled Diversity, Inclusion, in Sport Management Education. She currently sits on the board of directors for the Black Women in Sport Foundation. However, during her entire career, Jacqueline has been an advocate for positive change and helping to create a more inclusive culture among NASSM as well as the sport industry at large. She has served on various athletics councils while at George Mason University, Texas A&M University, as well as the University of Illinois, where she also held a position on the Chancellor's Committee on Race and Ethnicity. She has and continues to be a positive influence on the NASSM community, having served as the chair of the Diversity Committee in 2012 and 13, as well as a committee member the 2 years prior. She's twice been elected to serve as a member at large on the executive committee, and in that role has worked to improve communication between the EC and the International Relations Committee, the Diversity Committee, as well as Women in NASSM. Jacqueline's been invited to participate in various workshops and panels, but her more recent effort is extremely noteworthy. In 2019, she joined Drs. John Singer, Aquila Carter-Francique, Charles Crowley, and Nefertiti Walker in leading an insightful panel discussion on the low representation of Black scholars attending NASSM. This presentation was highlighted in Dr. McGarry's Ziegler Award speech for addressing significant concerns with inclusivity among NASSM's culture, membership, and conference attendees. But most importantly, if you spend any time with Jacqueline, and I have, you know her to be a very caring, devoted, and honest person. I've known Jacqueline for a little over 15 years, and early on in our friendship, I was once joking with her about an uncomfortable situation and comments that she had recently endured. I was not aware that they were uncomfortable for her, and I thought little of it, but later she opened up and shared with me just how much it bothered her and why. We discussed how such comments could be perceived negatively in different communities and cultures. And importantly, rather than admonish and attack me, she created a space for us to have a frank and open conversation. Jacqueline always wants to bring awareness to and improve inequitable experiences and opportunities for people of marginalized identities. She wants to open lines of communication and have the tough conversations that can lead to such positive change. Um, she personifies the social advancement that she wants to impress upon anyone she talks to. She pushes forward her scholarly efforts and she works towards in her daily interactions. During the time that we've been friends, Jacqueline has consistently been involved with personal and professional activities that demonstrate her commitment to making NASSM in the field of sport management more inclusive and equitable. Um, I'm really pleased and honored to introduce Dr. Jacqueline McDowell as this year's NASSM Diversity Award winner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor, for your wonderful introduction. Your words made me realize that I have done a lot, but I have a lot more to do. I chose Trevor to introduce me because even though we have not stayed in contact as much as I think we both would have liked to, he has always held a special place in my heart. When I was a doctoral student at Texas A&M University, he was the person that made sure I understood the importance of living while learning, knowing when it is time to close the books and open a beer. He made sure I felt included and welcomed at Texas A&M University, and for that I will forever be grateful. Thank you very much, Trevor. I would like to thank everyone that was involved in the nomination and selection process for this award. I am very honored to be amongst a list of scholars that I have admired for years. Similar to most recipients of NASSM awards, I received a lot of congratulatory emails, calls, and text messages. And one in particular stood out to me. It was a message that I received from one of my former colleagues, Scott Tainsky. And he said, on top of everything you have done personally, your passion and commitment compelled me to up my efforts toward fairness and justice on an everyday basis when we were colleagues at U of I, and that has stayed with me since. This is what I love to hear. I recently spoke to some college graduates about legacy, and what Scott said is what I want to be known for. I don't want to just say and do. I also want to influence and inspire others to use their words and actions to advocate for a more just society. Thank you, Scott, for reminding me of what I once said about my legacy. There are a lot of other people that I would like to thank for supporting and challenging me throughout the years. My list is long, but I only have time to highlight a few people. So I would first like to thank my mom and all the Georges in my life. My dad, George McDowell Sr., my brother, George McDowell Jr., and my former doctoral studies advisor, George Cunningham, for all the support that they have provided me throughout the years. I would not be who I am without them. I would also like to thank my colleagues at my current institution, George Mason University, for their support. As you can tell, my life has been blessed with Georges. I would also like to thank my husband, Paul, for challenging me to think more critically about diversity and inclusion concepts and terminology. And finally, I would like to thank my beautiful little girl, Kennedy Simone, because her presence reminds me daily that if I want her to grow up in a world where people don't question her capabilities because of the color of her skin, I have to put in some more work. So people that know me know I'm a fan of the Avengers, and I love watching the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. A powerful moment stood out to me in one of the episodes. Sam spoke about the significance of being a black man carrying the Captain American shield and wearing the stars and stripes. He stated that the only power I have is that I believe we can do better. We can't demand that people step up if we don't meet them halfway. Look, you control the banks. You can move borders. You can knock down a forest with an email. You can feed 1 million people with a phone call. But the question is, who's in the room when you make those decisions? Is it the people you're going to impact? Or is it just more people like you? The same question can be asked about NASSM. The lack of racial and ethnicity diversity on the EC is something that many scholars have taken notice of. The Diversity Committee even highlighted this in their workshop this morning, titled Barriers to Diversity and Inclusion in NASSM Leadership. And that workshop focused on identifying barriers and strategies to advance diverse representation in leadership in NASSM. So a lot of scholars have actually been commenting about this. Many people know that I frequently will say change starts with conversation. And so if you don't include all impacted people in important conversations, we will never get the change that many of us so much want. To have bold and inclusive conversation, we must first acknowledge that there are important differences that make a profound difference in people's perceptions and their outcomes. We should also start asking the uncomfortable questions when it comes to our association. We need to ask ourselves the questions that a few colleagues and I explored a few years ago when we inquired about why there's not that many Black scholars attending the NASSM conference. We need to ask ourselves why a society that has a significant number of Korean scholars does not have one scholar of Korean descent on the executive committee. We need to ask ourselves why the Women in NASSM Special Interest Group was created. And if you don't believe women in NASSM face inclusion challenges, you won't understand why there is a need, a significant need for WIN. If you're not concerned about the experiences of NASSM's LGBT scholars, Asian, Hispanic, and Black scholars, scholars with disabilities, trans men and women, then you may not be empathetic to NASSM members who don't feel welcome. This past year has been challenging in many regards. We have had to deal with a global pandemic that has resulted in people experiencing physical, mental, and social losses. We have experienced a year of protests against police brutality and calls for social justice and societal change. This year's conference theme, Race Forward, Agents for Change in Sport Management, it was developed in response to what was occurring in the larger society. As noted in the theme, I would like to encourage sports scholars and educators to more fully explore your role in advancing racial justice through your research, your teaching, and in practice. We, however, cannot just have conference themes and statements about diversity without clear and transparent goals and metrics to measure change. I also believe the chair of the Diversity Committee should have a role on the EC. We must also remember that diversity and inclusion efforts include all races and ethnicities. We cannot think that diversity means non-white. It includes men and women, cisgender and transgendered individuals, persons that identify as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, asexual, scholars with and without disabilities. All members of NASSM are a part of diversity and have a role in advancing its power. I would like to encourage everyone to use their voice to advocate for changes in NASSM, in your respective institutions, and in society in general. Thank you, and thank you again for this honor.